The sky over London was gray, but the firestorm brewing behind palace walls had nothing to do with weather. This wasn't about some tabloid gossip or another headline feud. It was about erasure, not of a person, but of a legacy. Princess Anne, the woman who'd worn the uniform, led the parades, shook hands with thousands of soldiers, and bled quiet dignity into her royal role for over 40 years, found her name scratched out like a mistake, not whispered away, erased. It started with a pen stroke, one line through her name on the Naval Celebration's official program. That single act sent tremors through the corridors of Buckingham Palace, though no one dared say it aloud. Everyone knew who was behind it: Camilla. Not just the Queen Consort, but a woman who had clawed her way through public scorn and royal resistance, and now, with King Charles at her side, had begun planting her flag on every royal stage she could reach. And this stage, the National Naval Celebration, it was supposed to be Anne's. But now the spotlight had shifted. Camilla wanted center stage. A ceremony that had always been about service and sacrifice was about to become her platform for power. She wore her red silk gown like armor, her every move polished and poised for the cameras. She wasn't just attending, she was headlining, and behind the scenes, orders had been given. Remove Anne's name, her seat, her image, wipe her clean from the record. At first, Anne said nothing. She didn't argue, didn't demand her place back. That wasn't her way. She'd never needed noise to prove her worth. She'd earned her stripes through decades of grit and quiet loyalty. But when the letter arrived, an official notice downgrading her role in the event to a mere spectator, something in her shifted. Not broken, just sharpened. A cold clarity. She didn't cry. She didn't protest. She just stood by the window of her estate at Gatcombe Park watching the fields. Her fingers curled tight around the letter. She might have stayed silent, might have let it pass, but someone else didn't. Sir Timothy Lawrence had spent his life at sea, commanded ships through storms, and stood proudly beside Anne through every royal duty, every military tour, every personal moment she'd been denied praise for. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't royal by blood, but he knew honor, and when he read the letter, he saw what it really was: an attack. Not just on Anne, but on everything she represented. So he did what Anne couldn't. He marched into the Ministry of Defense, not with noise, but with purpose. The council was already seated when he arrived, a long, polished table, stiff suits, nervous eyes. The air was thick with avoidance. Red ink still visible on the documents in front of them. Anne's name, slashed like an afterthought. Timothy didn't shout. He placed his hands on the table and said, quietly but firmly, "There cannot be a naval celebration without the Princess Royal. She is the Navy." No one spoke. A few looked down. A retired general gave the faintest nod, but the silence was damning. They knew he was right, but they were powerless against Camilla's iron will. Timothy saw it in their eyes: fear, politics, calculation. He left the room with no victory, but his message had landed. The room was shaken. Back at Clarence House, Camilla heard of the confrontation. She wasn't amused. "He thinks he can challenge the crown," she said, her voice like ice. "Let's remind him where he stands." And just like that, Timothy's name vanished too, from guest lists, from seating plans, from every corner of the upcoming celebration. The man who dared defend his wife was now being erased alongside her. The day of the celebration came cloaked in that familiar London chill, but the energy in Horse Guards Parade was anything but cold. Flags whipped in the wind, the air thick with tradition. Rows of dignitaries filled the grandstands, every seat precisely assigned. Cameramen adjusted their lenses, ready to capture the crowning moment, a moment Camilla believed would be hers. She arrived dressed to impress, a rich crimson gown cascading over the steps as she ascended the main platform. Her smile was poised, her presence dominant. From where she stood, the ceremony was already a victory. Anne had been pushed to the side, literally. Her seat was tucked away near the edge of the crowd, away from cameras, away from honor. Not forgotten, but certainly sidelined. And beside her, as expected, was Timothy. But if Camilla expected to see defeat on their faces, she didn't look closely enough. What she missed was the calm focus in Timothy's eyes. What no one had noticed was that in the days leading up to this celebration, he'd made quiet moves behind palace walls. Not through force, not through press, through brotherhood. Veterans, old naval allies, men and women who had served with Anne, saluted her, followed her. Timothy had reached out, not to stir rebellion, but to remind them them who had truly earned their salute. The band began. A brass swell rolled through the square. Rows of active naval officers and veterans stepped into formation. This was the moment Camilla had been waiting for, the grand salute to the monarchy. But something was off. The marching column didn't stop before the Queen Consort. It kept moving. Camilla's smile flickered. Then it happened. The formation halted not before the throne, not before the cameras, but before Anne. Hundreds of veterans, from white-haired admirals to fresh-faced sailors, stood still. In perfect unison, they raised their hands in a crisp salute. Not a word was spoken, just that solemn, thunderous gesture of loyalty. It hit like an explosion in silence. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Camilla stood motionless, her smile frozen, her jaw clenched. The salute wasn't for the monarchy. It was for the admiral, the Princess Royal. Anne didn't move for a moment, but her posture said everything. Dignified, upright, and unmoved, she returned the salute. Simple, graceful, but commanding. Timothy, standing beside her, didn't smile. He didn't need to. This wasn't a victory lap. It was restoration, vindication, a message louder than any speech. Loyalty can't be replaced by status. The media caught it all. Cameras that had been focused on the main platform pivoted, snapping shots of the veterans and Timothy. In the background, Camilla was a red blur, ignored by the very crowd she had tried to win over. Later that evening, news outlets ran with one image: Anne in her Navy uniform receiving the salute with Timothy by her side. Headlines poured in: soldiers stand with Anne, the admiral's moment, Camilla overshadowed at ceremony. Social media was on fire. Clips of the moment were shared millions of times. Veterans posted stories. Soldiers shared photos from their time with Anne. The public didn't need an explanation. They understood. At Clarence's house, Camilla stared at the newspaper. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her tea. It had gone cold. Across from her, Margaret, her most loyal aide, said nothing. What could she say? The Queen Consort had been outshone, not by aggression, not by media spin, but by decades of earned respect. Power could silence a name on paper, but it couldn't erase it from the hearts of those who had followed it into battle. The next morning, London awoke to front pages that felt more like history books than tabloids. Every major paper, from the Times to the smallest local gazette, showed the same image: Princess Anne, solemn and strong, accepting the veterans' salute. The headlines weren't dramatic. They didn't need to be. Anne's moment, a salute to service. When loyalty chose its leader, it was clear who the nation had sided with. At Gatcombe Park, Anne sat in her drawing room, the soft rustle of the fireplace breaking the silence. The stack of newspapers remained untouched on the table. She didn't need to read them. Her phone had been ringing all morning. Naval officers, old friends, even foreign military dignitaries calling just to say what she already knew. The salute had spoken louder than any crown. Timothy walked in with 2 mugs of tea, one for each of them. No words passed between them at first. He simply handed her the cup, then sat beside her on the sofa, sinking into the quiet with the ease of a man who had weathered storms and returned home. "You changed everything, Tim," Anne said softly. "I didn't change anything," he replied. "They just remembered who you are." In Buckingham Palace, King Charles watched the broadcast replay in silence. As the video played, showing hundreds of soldiers saluting his sister, he didn't stop it. He didn't fast forward. He just sat there, lips pressed in a tied line, his expression unreadable. But his silence spoke volumes. For all of Camilla's maneuvering, Charles knew loyalty wasn't something you could script. He may not have intervened, but he wasn't blind to what had happened. And neither, it seemed, was the rest of the world. The final blow came days later at the official naval medal ceremony. After mounting public pressure and internal debate, the organizing council reinstated Princess Anne's role as the presiding royal. She returned to the podium, not out of revenge, not even to prove a point, but simply to do the duty she'd always honored. Her uniform was immaculate, her voice steady. She handed out each medal with a quiet reverence that made even the youngest sailors stand straighter. The applause after her closing remarks lasted longer than anyone expected, and when Timothy joined her on stage, the ovation only grew. Camilla was present, of course, seated further back this time, her expression fixed. She didn't speak. didn't smile. She clapped when required, but the spark in her eyes had dulled. Her power was intact, her title unchanged, but something inside had fractured. She had tried to rewrite the narrative, to paint herself as the center of royal strength. Instead, the public had written their own story, and it didn't include her in the way she hoped. Margaret, her aide, approached with a clipboard full of upcoming appearances. "Ma'am," she began cautiously, "about your next military event?" Camilla shook her head. "No," she said quietly, "let them have it. I'll find my place somewhere else." She didn't say it with defeat, just recognition. Back at Gatcombe, Anne stood in the field near her stables, watching the horses graze in the afternoon sun. Timothy joined her, hands in his pockets, quiet as always. They didn't need grand speeches or celebrations. They didn't need validation. They had something better. Respect earned, not demanded. "Think this is over?" Timothy asked. Anne gave a half smile, her eyes on the horizon. "Nothing's ever really over in this family," she replied, "but we stood our ground." He nodded, "And we'll do it again if we have to." Their hands brushed, fingers locking gently. In the distance, Big Ben's chimes rang once more, steady, grounded, and unfazed. Just like them.